Our second scripture reading is from the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, verse 29 through 12, verse 2. By faith, the people passed through the Red Sea as if it were dry land. But when the Egyptians attempted to do so, they were drowned. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell after they had been encircled for 7 days. By faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient, because she had received the spies in peace. What more should I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched raging fire, escaped the edge of the sword, won strength out of weakness, became mighty in war, put armies to flight. Women received their dead by resurrection. Others were tortured, refusing to accept release in order to obtain a better resurrection. Others suffered mocking and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned to death. They were sawn in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, persecuted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains and in caves and holes in the ground. Yet all these, though they were commended for their faith, did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better, so that they would not, apart from us, be made perfect. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely. Let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who for the sake of joy that was set before him endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God. Last Sunday, in my sermon, I mentioned that I've been reading Bruce Springsteen's autobiography, and that I identified with some of it, and those days, and picturing myself standing there in front of the bedroom mirror in my parents' bedroom. They had the big mirror, holding my electric guitar and imagining myself being the rock star playing in front of the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh before tens of thousands of screaming fans. Roy! But obviously, my identification with Bruce Springsteen ends pretty quickly, doesn't it? I didn't have either talent or drive or personality or skill set or luck or commitment or probably any of the above to become a rock star. And to be truthful, the dream was abandoned pretty quickly. By the time I was in college, I had no more dreams of being a rock star. Well, just a little bit of dreams of being a rock star. But certainly by the time I got to seminary, I had another dream that took its place. I would be a rock star pastor. Everyone in the American Baptist Churches USA would know my name. I would be a featured speaker at the biennial meetings, and their only question would be, can we have him again this time? We had him just 2 years ago. Seminaries would invite me to come and speak to the student body, and at the end of my talk, the students would lean over to each other and whisper, I want to be like him. I would be the pastor of a big, important church. I would write books that would make a difference in people's lives. I would be visible in all of the best ways on the issues of the day. And when the news wanted to have someone who would speak for Jesus, they knew who to go to. And there I would be. I was going to make a mark, and it was going to be significant. Well, our society encourages that. We hold up people, superstars, as models to aspire to. If you want to be a gymnast, well, we all know who's the very best gymnast in the world, and you better be like Simone if you want to do this. Nobody knows who got third place, let alone who got fifth place. And the message that we get in any field that we're looking at is that if we don't get that far, if we aren't the superstars, somehow we have fallen short, or worse yet, we are a complete and abject failure. Because we aren't the one who's up there on the platform getting the gold medal. And we do that same thing regarding faith. Now, not only in terms of rock star pastors, but also in terms of the expectation that if we are going to be people of faith, we better have it, and we better do it. And it gets communicated in all kinds of ways. Well, if you didn't get healed, it's because you didn't have enough faith. And we all know that God is on the side, that God's people get blessed. And if you're driving a Toyota, well, there must be a reason for it. Because God's children drive only the very best. And anything less is not enough. Today's scripture gives us an important corrective to that kind of understanding. It follows last Sunday's passage and continues in that chapter 11, the faith chapter, and that still is the central idea here. And it begins with this list of superstar models of faith. I have to tell you, I didn't know the story of Jephthah. Did you? It's a good thing, because frankly, he would not make any of our lists as a superstar. What he did was horrific. But the preacher in Hebrews held him up, and the audience would have known who that was. And for whatever crazy reason, they would have said, yep, that's a hero of the faith. There's a person who was willing to give up everything for faith. And we understand that. We read those heroes who did it and who, what's the list? They conquered kingdoms, they administered justice, they obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched raging fire, escaped the edge of the sword, won strength out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight, women received their dead by resurrection. We go, yeah, that's what I want to do. But we don't. It's awfully difficult to measure up to. And frankly, I don't know anybody who does any of those things. None of them. But the preacher goes on and switches gears here in a way that's equally difficult to understand. Others were tortured, refusing to accept release in order to obtain a better resurrection. Others suffered mocking and flogging, chains, imprisonment, stoned to death, sawn in two, killed by the sword, went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, persecuted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains and in caves and holes on the ground. Let me tell you, that is not the kind of faith I aspire to. None of those things. And had I been ready to graduate from seminary, and before they handed me my diploma, they said, oh, by the way, goat skins and holes in the ground. I would have said, rock star, here I come. But in showing these extremes, the preacher in Hebrews is telling his audience that faithfulness does not equal results. Sometimes things work out like you expect. Sometimes great faith gets great results. Sometimes not. Sometimes the best we can do is to hang in, run the race as best we can, and just leave the results to God. And those people are the cloud of witnesses that the preacher inspires his audience to hold in their hearts and in their minds. Whenever I read this passage, and I always think about my cloud of witnesses, and I've mentioned most of these people at other times in sermons, but I'm going to do it again anyway. There was Charlie Apple, and Charlie took me under his wings when I was 13 years old. And 13-year-old boys are not quite human. But he treated me like I was. And it made a difference. Earl Krebs was my first pastor. And he was the pastor of a relatively large church, and yet he still had time for me. Franklin Vale was my supervisor when I was in seminary. Franklin was actually I never called him Franklin. He was Pastor Vale. Pastor Vale was the worst preacher I've ever heard in my life. But he taught me that you don't have to have all of the gifts. He was a wonderful pastor. Jan Chartier taught me that God honors and uses women's gifts and sees them as just as important as men's, maybe more. Peter was my first friend to trust me and come out of the closet and tell me I'm gay. Choki, my supervisor at Haverford State Mental Hospital, taught me how to see the presence of Jesus in the most unlikely of people, and showed me that if I didn't see Jesus there, it wasn't their fault, it was mine. Phil Rotuno was a classmate of mine when I was doing my doctorate, and we laughed that he was a Roman Catholic priest, that they were either going to make him pope or put him in the worst hellhole they could find. And you know he's not a pope. He was at the time the chaplain at Seton Hall University, and every year he would get a report that he was supposed to fill out for the provost. How many students came to Mass, how many had counseling sessions, how many had had an experience of that calling to the priesthood, and this whole list of things. And he would take his red pen out on the sheet and he would write "does not apply," and he would hand it in. And they would send him another one with a little note on it: "You must fill this out, Father Rotuno." And he would get his red pen and he would write "does not apply," and he'd hand it back in. And then they would call him in. And the provost would say, "Father Rotuno, you have to tell us you have to give us these numbers. We have to justify this position of a chaplain." And he'd say, "It doesn't matter." He said, "If I have one student who comes in one time and has an experience that changes their life with the presence of God, that makes the whole thing worthwhile. And if every student comes to every Mass and not a single one walks out any different than they came in, it's a waste of everybody's time and money. It does not apply." They sent him to a hellhole. And he loved it. I didn't realize how important those folk were at the time. None of them. But they are part of my cloud of witnesses. And the list goes on. It includes scores more people, including you. And some of those people in my cloud had huge impact. The names I mentioned, those people left marks in me that are as deep as they can possibly be. Others had just small nudges. But those small nudges were still very important and helped me to become the person I am today. Now, lots of those people would be embarrassed if they heard me name them. Some of them would be surprised. I did what? But they are my cloud of witnesses. Did I tell you that you all are part of that cloud? Now, to be truthful, I haven't always followed their lead nearly as well as I'd like. I haven't learned the lessons that cloud has taught nearly as well as I should have. But I can still point at them, and I can still hold them up. And when I look at someone and shudder because of how they dressed or how they're carrying themselves or because they have tardive dyskinesia or whatever else, I can hear Bob Cholke saying to me, no, your call is to be there and welcome them. And if you look, Roy, you will see, and he would have had a string of 4-letter words in the middle of all of this, you will see the presence of Jesus. Well, I think of that cloud whenever I feel discouraged, whenever I feel tempted, whenever I feel that maybe giving up would just be easier. And I have to say that probably the most important learning from all of those as I've matured and grown came from Phil Rotuno. That I didn't have to be a rock star. He didn't have to be Pope. He taught me that being part of one person's life, part of one person's journey, is more important than an amazing sermon on YouTube that goes viral, but has no lasting impact. All of my cloud helped me to mature and to see my gifts and my lack of gifts in a realistic way, and through all of that, to affirm who I am and who I'm not, and to see value in that. And that I don't need to be someone or something else. You have your cloud too. And it's possible that you don't think about them very often unless a preacher stands up here and says, you have a cloud, think about them. But those folk who have influenced your life and your faith and helped to form you into the person you are. Those people who are the foundation on which you stand, especially when things are shaky, who are the inspiration for you when things are hard, and the reminder that whatever the results, faithfulness always brings us closer to God. And that is what counts. The results are secondary. So I'd like you to take a couple of moments. If you want to close your eyes, you can do that. But I want you to think for a couple of moments about some of the people who are in your cloud. Some of the people who have influenced you and made you the person you are. Okay? Let's just take a couple of moments of silence to do that. Yeah, a couple of moments. Okay. Now, you might want to write those names down. Because that, for me at least, when I write the names down, that helps to concretize it for me. And I can't ignore it anymore because it's there. So there are some pencils in the pews, and there's envelopes there if you want to take one of those, or if you have something else. I like to put things on my calendar or my phone, and then they're there forever. But you might want to write those names down. And if some of those folk are still around, maybe you want to seek them out this week and say to them, you know what? Thank you. Thank you for being part of my cloud of witnesses. Thank you for the ways that you help me to be who I am and the difference that you make and have made in my life. Thank you for that. They might be embarrassed. They might be surprised. But I guarantee they'll be touched. Therefore, Since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely. Let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer,